Welcome back, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. Today, I would like to introduce Michelle Shekhinah. Michelle was married for many years and was a stay-at-home mom for 2 children. In 2015, Michelle realized that her husband was addicted to drugs. In this time, she had experienced financial, emotional, and sexual abuse from him, which turned into his sex trafficking her. Michelle spent many nights crying on the floor until one night she saved her life and ran for the door. Since then, she has been healing herself with therapy and other techniques. Welcome to the A Little Less Fear podcast.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lino. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this.
Thanks for being here. I mean, I can imagine that. I can only imagine
Mhm.
that it's not easy to be on such a worldwide platform discussing something like this. And this is a motivational podcast and also a
Mhm.
podcast of personal growth. So before I go into depth asking you questions, going deep here, I'd like to know your journey to where you are at today, and you can start wherever you'd like.
My journey today. So I could go a little bit backwards. My journey is
Sure.
I'm about to start my next new journey, which being a stay-at-home mother of two special needs children, I have been doing parenting, let's say, mothering for 25 years. And it's not just my own kids. I'm the type that is what we call the free mom hugs mom. So anyone who is also in the LGBTQ community, whose parents don't accept them, I bring them into my womb and under my arms and my umbrella, and I love on them. So
That's beautiful.
thank you. So my children have flown the coop, so to speak. So now I'm focusing on myself, which means lots of therapy, which I've been doing, and specializing in trauma and group therapy, DBT groups, things like that. I'm actually going back to school starting in January so that I can become a therapist in domestic violence, family services, human services, because there's such a need there, I have found through all of my educating of myself and therapies, which I never would have known had I not gone through my trauma.
That's
So this
that's
is,
excellent.
yeah. So I believe that educating myself and trying to figure out why everything happened, what did it mean, really, I just I was searching for the answers, and I think that education is always a great way to look at it, because on an intellectual level we can break down what happens to us. If we're too emotional, there's no way to see clear through it all.
Very
And
true.
yeah, and I did go through that for a few years. And until I realized, and I'm a healthcare worker anyway, a licensed healthcare worker. And I did realize that, one night when I'm studying the brain and memories and why do I have nightmares, and I'm studying the brain for 3 hours, I'm realizing, you know what, there's an answer here. And the answer is research and study so that I could help other people in that regard.
Beautiful.
So that
When
so
when you
that's
had
where I'm
that
at
when you
now.
had that epiphany research so
Mhm,
that you can help other people,
mhm,
how did that information come to you? Did you have your eyes closed? Were you praying,
mhm.
meditating? Was it just like a random thought that came to you?
Well, so let's go back a little bit, maybe a few
Sure.
months ago, where
Okay.
I had just left, not even just my husband, but a toxic work situation earlier this year. And I had gone to see a friend in the mountains and came back. And a long time ago, one of my therapists had said, that I had lived like the Jeffrey Epstein story. And I write about
Mm.
this on my website, the kind of like the parallel. And I didn't even understand that. And so I watched the series on Netflix, and I was like, wow, I had the epiphany, like, she's right. And so the next morning I woke up and I started having a panic attack because I do have that, neurosomatic trauma also that I have to work on, or I am working on. And what happened was, as most of us have or should, I have a support system that's very strong. So I called the top 8 people in my support system. And ironically, not one person picked up
Oh,
and or texted back. And I said, okay. So I found myself in the middle of a panic attack. And then eventually, just like the title, I hit the floor. My knees hit the floor on my yoga mat. where I have a window that faces east. And, I kind of went through the why this, why that, why me, all of that. And then boom, it hit me that I, I believe in God, there's the universe, there is all of that. And so I believe that I survived for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I was never alone in the situations that I was in. That entity was with me. I also believe in our ancestral background. Um, Even if it's someone who's adopted per se, you still have those genetics inside of you, whether you know them or not.
Oh
And,
yeah,
it takes over 4,000 people to make ourselves. And and
that's
I
incredible.
yeah, it is. And if you think about it, and then I come from a very strong female background, and they've all gone through so much trauma in their lives, just like all of our ancestors did. I mean, if you think about
Right.
everything, and I'm a big history buff. Love watching period series and movies on Netflix and all of that. And so if you think about everything that all of our ancestors have gone through and then created us, we have that within us. So at that moment I'm on the floor, I kind of felt that. And and it just took me out of panic and into like this mode where I was almost numb.
Mm-hmm.
And I had felt this feeling before and then I identified it with those past times where I was given something and I didn't know, um, whether it be an alcohol or a substance, a drink
Uh-huh.
or a drug. And but it was different. It was a more secure kind of numbness. And I'm looking up in the window and the sun is coming through and I could see my reflection and I was like, okay, I got it. I'm here now. I survived. You made sure I survived because I'm strong enough because I have all that strength in me from that woman and now I can help so many other people go through any sort of trauma
Right.
because I always say that trauma is like a number line. You have from 0 all the way to infinity. And, maybe small children have, kind of like a 5, which could be infinity to them, depending on, let's say, the level of bullying that they're experiencing,
Sure.
all the way up to someone who is in a domestic violence situation or a toxic work situation or a parental situation, to domestic violence, to emotional violence or emotional abuse, and then through the whole sexual body abuse. So, I've kind of gone through that whole gamut and I realized I've been through all of that my whole life. And now I'm here to help other people.
That's
So
that's
that's where
beautiful
I'm
to
at.
come with to that realization that now you're here to help other people.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
does that feel like to say that out loud and to feel it, to truly feel it, that you're coming out on the other side with a mission to help other people?
Well, I've always been someone that does. When I was
Mm.
younger, for whatever reason, and people laugh, they call me Dr. Doolittle because I will have animals be in my back glass door, like just poking at the door, wanting to come in, or a mother with her babies or ducklings. And that's been since I was young. So I've always been helping animals since I was little and, throughout my life. And then I became a licensed healthcare worker when I was 22. So I've kind of done that for a career also, but this is so different. This is when people say they have a calling, I get it now. I
Mhm.
completely understand it. I mean, I kind of understood and you're like, yeah, okay. But there's a certainty in myself, in my soul now, which was once broken. It's now kind of put back together
Mhm.
since that moment.
So
And there's no stopping me at this point.
I can feel that and I hear that. And I think
Thank
that's
you.
incredible. Keep going.
Thank
You're gonna
you.
change so
Yeah.
many lives. I can already feel
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, and I've been doing that. I mean, even since I came out, I would say in the first 3 months, I would start helping people that were still in it, and, even through my own healing, I was helping other people, which helped me heal, because that's really
Mm.
how we do that, is, they say, what is it when you pay it forward? It's sort of in that way, but it's helping while healing, and it
Oh,
really
yeah,
heals
absolutely.
it heals yourself, just like I'm sure you've experienced on your own.
I have. I have
Mhm.
actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So while we go backwards here, and you
Mhm.
said when you first came out, are you okay to talk about this when you first came out?
Mhm. Yes.
Can you take us through that?
Sure. When I first came out of my marriage, it was really scary. It was
How long were you
it.
married, Michelle?
I was married for over 20 years, and it was supposedly a happy, wonderful family life. It looked like all the picture frames that you see. I created that, and it was a friend of mine that said that because I said, "Was everything a lie?" Well, on my part, it wasn't. I truly love this man. We have two children that I absolutely they were intentionally created out of love. And then I had a home that we entertained. We did religious holidays, regular holidays, secular holidays. I had, entertaining fundraising events, big, huge events for the community and my neighbors. So, and I did all of that myself. And so to me, it wasn't a lie. What I didn't know is what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was, and I didn't know who he was apparently. So when I got out of it, it was it was about 16, 17 years until he started whatever it is that he wanted me to do, or whatever he was doing, he led me into.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I left with nothing practically, and had to go to a safe home and put myself there for a month and really readjust. I had I had things like running through my body. I remember I was lying in a bed and I started shaking. I didn't have very much control over my bodily functions because there was obviously something going through my body. I had lost about 18 pounds in 3 months and I couldn't understand it. And, whatever was in my system being given to me, perhaps without my knowing, it had started coming out because I was away from him. I was away from that situation. I was away from the groups of people that we were with, that
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to be with all the time. And it was just me. And I could feel, so there was a couple of, I would say there was about a week or two where it was almost like a detox. And
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, I don't know from that. I come from a very traditional professional background. So this was all new to me. And the people that I was with really didn't know about any of that also. So I was really hesitant actually to go to the hospital, to go to the doctors, because I was so concerned that if they found drugs in my system, and he even threatened that I would lose custody of my daughter. And she was a minor at the time. She's no longer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I waited, and I really thought I was going to die in that person's bed. And being a healthcare worker, I knew how to get myself to a point where I would be physically safe, in that regard, and manage my symptoms of what I was having. Um, and I took really good care of myself normally. So I just kind of, I raised that level a little bit more with healthy eating and vitamins and supplements and lots of hydration, of course. And I got a lot healthier. And then my family that were once isolated from me, by his choice, I'm the youngest of a lot of people, a lot of siblings, and I come from a large family. But he made sure, as they do, that I had no contact with them and that I was against them and they were against me and all of that. So they literally wrapped their arms around me and took care of me then.
That's
And
beautiful.
yeah, it was very beautiful. And then I finally did go and get all of the medical help that I needed and the psychological help, and I immediately went to Women in Distress. And they're actually the ones that said, you're in a domestic violence situation. And, even then, I wasn't saying those words,
Mm-hmm.
because I was so, as we know, gaslit and brainwashed and all of that for years,
Right.
especially in the end, that he had me thinking or questioning, did I want that to happen? Did I do that? Was it my choice? And the answer is no to all of it,
Right.
because we now, again, this is where education comes in.
Exactly.
There was so much coercion on his level. I mean, listen, this guy he's a great salesperson. And, not to so much, embark on him, but any person that's really great at convincing anyone to, in their job or what have you, they can do it personally, because personally is easy. If you're a great salesperson and you can sell corporations and that sort of thing, you can sell someone who's fully in love with you, will do anything for you. And that's what I was, you know.
And so when you finally left your husband, this was after over how long had you been sex trafficked by this time?
About 7 years, 6 or 7 years.
About 7 years.
Hmm.
And so when did you realize that this is what was happening?
I realized it when I was, it wasn't until afterwards. Um, I told a friend of mine who I've known since I was a child, male friend, who knew him, what had happened. And he said to me, he trafficked you. So, what are you talking about? Trafficked me. Because I don't look the part. At the time, I looked like Barbie in the Barbie movie. I mean, I had the hair and all of that because that was the expectation. Um, and I said, What are you talking? That's not. I'm not the demographic. That doesn't happen to people where I live. I was in a
Mhm.
prominent suburb and in a religious, situation and whatever. And he said, that's what happened to you. And, even my attorney was like, well, he pimped you out. And I was like, what? And those were hard words to accept. Even to this day, it's again, that's where the education, I get out of the emotional into the intellectual. And
Mhm.
it really is helpful. Um, so I did not even realize it until I was out. I knew that I was being put in dangerous situations, you know, almost immediately.
Mhm.
But the thing about people that are abusers is they really know how to work it. And it's 4 days on, 3 days off. For 4 days, they're really nice, sending flowers, taking you to dinner, being kind. Then 3 days, let's say on the weekend, it would start on a Thursday night. Let's go out for drinks. And again, it's a slow progression. Everything is about escalation. It's the frog in the pot of water. You do it very slowly, otherwise they jump out.
Mhm.
And that's what happened to me. And he started grooming me the day that we met, even before, because we met on the phone. He proposed to me after 6 weeks in front of 100 people. I mean, now we know better, that
Yeah.
I thought that was chivalrous and romantic. I definitely wasn't prepared for that. And it took me a while to answer him. But again, anyone who does that is a little bit on the manipulative side, if not a lot. We know that now. This was a long time ago. We that never would happen to me now.
Now that
Hopefully
you
it
look
doesn't.
back,
Mhm,
Michelle, now that you look back and your mind is clear and you're able to see that he manipulated
mhm,
you from even just asking to marry you
mhm,
within 6 weeks,
mhm,
are you able to see any other instances where there was him already
mhm,
starting that manipulation
mhm.
process, kind of getting you ready for sex trafficking? Or did you not really feel it or see it until it was actually happening? Or if I'm making any sense right now.
You're making complete sense. I'm
Okay.
thinking, I'm going back because it's a long time to think about.
Sure, sure.
He was doing things, and he admitted even to me in the end, because when he would get intoxicated, and it was to the point of like almost oblivion, where I would know after a certain hour, he would have 10 drinks in the night because he was also taking something, a drug that would keep him to the point where he could still function. Well, not function, but or I'd be sick after the second one personally, but
Mhm.
he would have 10 drinks, and of course I knew after the second one I'd be driving home. And then on the way home, it was like all admitting and confessing and all of that. So, he would confess to me that he was getting massages, certain kinds of massages, earlier when we were married and our kids were little, things like that. When his family would be at my house for brunch, he would excuse himself, his back hurts, and he'd be doing that. Or when he was away, let's say in Vegas for work, oh, I'm getting a massage in my room. I have to go. I don't feel well, whatever. And I'd be like, okay, honey, well, I hope you feel better. I'm going to take care of the kids. Cause again, I was so naive. I didn't know.
Sure.
So I missed a lot of things. Um, the sex trafficking didn't come until it did.
Uh-huh.
There was no warning to it whatsoever. Literally no warning. Um, I was in our hotel room and he walked in with someone, and it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and he had kept me out the entire night and all that goes along with that. And this was in Las Vegas.
Mhm.
And I'm sitting at a bar because he's using a restroom in the lobby. No one's in there. They're starting to get ready for breakfast. I'm exhausted and wanting to go to bed. And this this man comes and sits down next to me. This good-looking person out of nowhere and all of that. His perfect man that he, has claimed to say, if it would be. And it didn't even dawn on me that this is probably someone who was paid to sit next to me
Mhm.
until I was 2 years out of the marriage. Like, that's how clueless I was.
Mhm.
So we were talking, and then he comes, and this is what he would typically do. He'd come and become really great friends with this person immediately, arms around each other and talking. And now I'm like, I'm going to bed. It's time.
Sure.
And I'm waiting now for my husband to come, trying to stay awake. Okay. He walks in with this person behind him. And now I'm in a hotel room with a locked door. And I don't know how to end this. And he keeps the drugs going. And so, and that's what he would always do, was make sure that everyone in the room was being controlled by him. And, everyone's doing it. Come on, don't be a party pooper. You're going to ruin the night. All of these things were said to me all the time, or
Yeah.
just the aggression or or the silent treatment I would get for days if I didn't partake in whatever it is that he wanted to do. And then, after the situation, it would be like, I really enjoyed that because I also enjoyed being close to him. So it really wasn't about me per se. It, it was about the whole situation. And I was told by a professional that he probably put me in situations that he, in fact, wanted to be in himself
Most
but wasn't
likely.
ready.
Yeah.
Yes, but wasn't ready. Right. So, you've been doing this quite a bit, you understand. And I'm still learning that. I'm still learning the educational part of it, or talking to people that are
Mhm.
in the know, so to speak,
Right.
um, because I didn't even come to that. Someone had to explain that to me, that it wasn't even about me.
When you think about the first time it happened,
Mhm.
and I mean, I'm not sure if you've
That
had
was.
right, that was the first time that that
Mhm.
happened. And have you had the chance to look at or think about or remember the last time it happened and whether the
Mhm.
situations were similar or did they start to progressively get worse or more abusive? I mean, what was the last result
Mhm.
of that actually got you to snap out and say, I'm out of here, I'm done?
Mhm. They did get worse because it wasn't just him. There were other people involved at this point. I had become a pawn for quite a few people, for groups of people. There
Mm-hmm.
were three different groups. Um, and, I've explained this. We talked about the Jeffrey Epstein story, and that's just a horrific situation because you're dealing with children. And what I have said was, this is a person that knew everything about me, every childhood trauma, every, the shadow work, all of that stuff that we know about now. He knew everything. He knew all of the situations with my family, or, my parents, all of that, that we all are always working on. And he exploited that.
Yeah.
And he would tell everybody, she was this, or, she was fat when she was in high school. You won't recognize her. Or she was, wants attention, and he'd rip my shirt open and, do all of that. Or other people would say things to me. So, in that regard, and here I am very naive because, I'm still raising these two kids in addition to having to deal with this. And, and so, it's almost like as if they were dealing with a child or a teenager, I should say,
Exactly.
and because they were preying on me in that, and he would have me do things that were very unbelievably inappropriate for a woman and a mother, of his children. And some of that I didn't know what to say, I didn't know what to do. And this is more so in the beginning of it. And of course it was, here's more drinks, here's more drug, there was no was not an option, and then keeping me up. So there were definitely times where I'd be up for over 24 hours, and then he would present the situation. So my coherence level is very low. I'm not in my right mind, and all I kept thinking was, I just want to go home. I have to be home. I have this to do. Whether I had sitters or family watching my children, it still, those were my kids. Like, that was my life. This isn't my life. But what happened was, for him, the scale switched. So now I'm like, I'm doing a balancing act. So, and I see him escalating and progressing, and he's got other people now. So the situation happens, and I'm being, shushed, or my hand over my mouth, or going to a club where he knows the owners, and he walks me to a back room, and I don't know where I'm going, and he's got my hand, and I'm following him, and people, or someone's following him, and the door is shut, and security's on the other side, male, or watching. And it wasn't always sex. Sometimes it was just, a little act or whatever it was. And I just knew that I couldn't get out. And there was no screaming. The person who would be helping was the one at the door, holding the
Mm.
door shut, or holding the door shut, or looking in, or whatever. So there was no way out. And those were more of the situations that happened. Or we'd be at a friend's house, and it was me and him and his best friend, who I thought was like my brother, but had his own intentions. So I would pretend to sleep, or get sick, or even pretend to get sick. That's where the floor comes in. And sometimes it was me not seeing, or seeing my behavior change, but I couldn't do anything about it, because he just kept the party going,
He kept the
and I
party
couldn't.
going, and he also kept you almost not coherent. So
No,
you're not
exactly.
sleeping, you're probably not
Exactly.
eating well,
Mm-mm,
you're
mm-mm.
exhausted.
Exhausted.
There's alcohol, there's drugs,
Hmm.
all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
You're
Hmm.
not feeling safe. Then
Right.
how can anyone
Right.
and how can anyone get up
Right.
and leave at that moment?
Right. And the person who, would have been the one to protect me was the one that was giving me away.
Right.
So, and then I thought, okay, here are these guy friends that I consider my brothers. They'll protect me from him. But that's not what happened. And again, even the women had their own agenda, because of their boyfriends or spouses, that they wanted me with them, whatever it was, or just to be a pawn in their game, because it's like a group of mean girls that have been friends for years, and here I am coming in, and it's like in the movie or the theater show, it's like, come sit with us. And I'm like, okay, I'll be a part of your group, just like in junior high school. Like I said, it's
Right.
like playing off me as a young teenager,
Right.
and then him manipulating that situation, because he was friends with all the girls. So,
Mhm.
like I said, when I left with nothing. I left with no friends. None of my furniture. Like, I left, and you know, no trust either.
Michelle, what got you to finally leave?
It took a good 2 years. I'll be honest with you. The kids are always an issue for everybody, and financial is always an issue. I had nothing in my name. I had stopped working, of course, when we had the kids. I really didn't have an option. I was the caretaker of them. I had a team for each child: medical doctors, school educators, tutors. Fighting the school board for their rights, their education, all of that. He supposedly went to work and worked, but in the end, that did not happen. He had stopped doing that. It was a really hard decision, in the sense that my kids wouldn't leave with me. They didn't want to leave their beds, or their pets, or their Xbox, or whatever it is the kids like in their home. Because even though he was doing things either to me, or punching a hole in the wall, or running out saying he was going to kill himself, and my older son saw that, they didn't want to leave. My older son was worried that his father was going to do something drastic, and he wanted to be there, to be the parent, as he said.
To
My
be
younger
there
one,
to protect him.
yes, to protect him from himself, essentially.
Hmm.
And and still does, mind you. And my younger one was, I tried to protect her as much as I could. He would come home intoxicated and just want to go in her room and say hi, and like, he was so inebriated. Or if I would go in there, he would, to say goodnight to her, he would start arguing with me in front of her. And it would just be a whole scene, and I knew that he wouldn't hurt them. His
Mm-hmm.
behavior would, but he wouldn't hurt them. And then it got to be at the point where I thought to myself, if I stay, I will not be alive in a week, because I had no control over my thoughts. I knew that something wasn't right. And physically and emotionally, I knew something was not right.
Oh.
And I just left. And I didn't leave and then say goodbye. What happened was my daughter was just starting high school. So even though I was in a safe house that was about 15 minutes away, I would make her lunch at that house, go wake her up in the morning at where she was, my old house, get her dressed, help her get ready for school, and take she and her friend to school. So, and then I pick her up from school, get them snack, homework, all. So I was still running the kids, but I wasn't sleeping there. I was afraid to touch anything. I was afraid to eat anything. I mean, there really were no groceries, so I would bring groceries over. I was still manning the house. I was still parenting. I just didn't. When he would come home, I'd leave. I didn't want to be around him. I didn't feel safe. All of that. Um,
And
but again, mhm.
when you finally go ahead, then again.
Well, I knew that he'd be okay. And then I had tried to take my daughter with me, and she stayed for about 2 days, but then she was just insistent about going back. I mean, she was a young teenager at the time, so I obliged her in that regard, with the full intention on getting a home quickly that I could move into, and I did. I
And
did.
so when you finally decided to leave because you felt that there was something that wasn't right with that
Mhm,
situation,
mhm,
you hadn't been feeling well for a while,
mhm,
you were physically exhausted, mentally,
mhm,
emotionally, spiritually, all of it, I can imagine.
mhm.
And when you finally did leave, the day that you left, are you able to take us through that process?
I want to say it was a night. Um, it's funny because I really, it's like our brain protects us.
Right.
So I really don't remember the exact moment. I remember that I had my suitcase packed. I had my daughter's suitcase packed, and my son was over 18, so I couldn't tell him what to do. And I took her with me. We got in the car and said, "We're just going to stay here for a couple of days." And she did oblige. We took the dogs, and it wasn't until we were there and she was very unhappy. Um, I remember it was kind of like being in what you would think is like a tornado. Nothing felt settled, but nothing had felt settled for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a little bit of a different feeling. Um, and I was scared. Listen, I had already found a tracker in my car that he admitted was his and wanted it back, of which my lawyer still has it to this day. And there was medication. His closet was full of medication because he had a friend that's a physician, so he really could get anything he wanted, and did. And so I remember taking everything out of the house to and I took pictures of it and then got rid of all of it because I did not know what was going on with my body. So I wanted to have that information, proof, and then get it out so he couldn't hurt me or anyone else with it.
Mm-hmm.
Not that he couldn't get it and hasn't still, but that was the goal there.
Sure.
And then I had gotten a phone that he couldn't track because I mean, again, he was tracking everything of mine, and I didn't know really until after the fact. And then there were people following me, and because I knew the people that I would go into a store and I would see them, and they were friends of his, but he didn't know that I knew them, because we were, let's say, friends on Facebook, and I recognized the couple that were kept following myself and my father around, and then he admitted to doing that, and um, you know, so there were all these things that were happening, and it was a very scary time. And they say that when the woman leaves or when a person leaves, that's the worst part. it gets really scary because they're either checking up on you or they're losing control. And that's the whole point of all of this. It's a control
Right.
factor, which we know. And um, so I had to really grasp the situation that I was in. And what I did was I really honed down and, got off of social media for a while. I had a new phone number. I stayed in the house for a very long time, and I really regrouped, and I had to replant myself, so to speak, and my roots, and gain composure of who I am and remember who I was before all of this happened. And that was a very strong woman, a strong-willed person, a healthcare worker, and a licensed healthcare worker, and you know, the somebody who was very religious. I actually went to my religious organization, and every single day, and became part of that community because I was very strong in that community before he pulled me out.
Mhm.
But what he did was he called all of my closest friends, to including people there, saying that I was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I had cheated on him, and that he wanted to put me in either some sort of a mental institution and or a drug rehab. And he had called my whole family, like all of that. And he even admitted it because I said to him at some point, "Are you going to stop calling?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll stop."
Mhm.
And I wish I could be someone that makes this stuff up, but
Right.
I'm not. I'm not. I mean, he would try and prove that I wrote notes that I owed my drug dealer a certain amount of money, and it was in my handwriting. But, we've been together for 20 years. How many cards have I given him that somebody could easily trace?
Right.
And I even looked at him and I said, who writes an IOU to their drug dealer? Like, just the thought of that, like, who would write IOU, And I said, first of all, because he tried to convince me that I am on drugs, that I have one. Like, and that's how twisted of a person I was dealing with.
Michelle, when
So
you left and you had your daughter with you, do your kids know now? How long has it been, Michelle, since you left?
so it's been 4 years.
It's been four
Four
years.
years 4 years this month.
And when did your kids, I'm assuming because you have a close relationship with your daughter that she knows some of the story.
She does. She actually figured out a lot of it.
She figured
And
out a lot of it.
she figured out a lot. She's a really sharp cat. I mean, listen, this generation, she's
Oh
18,
yeah,
this
this
generation,
generation,
they're just brilliant.
they're
And
so
that
good.
they really are. And that's the beauty of social media, is the awareness. Obviously there's
True.
pros and cons, but I look at it as the awareness now that we have. Sometimes we're a little bit infiltrated with the awareness, but at least it's there for them. And the awareness and acceptance for this generation, I love.
So did your daughter come out
Um,
asking you questions about it, or did you just say, "Hey, this is what's been happening to me. This is what happened."
I didn't sit her down until after she turned 18. I wasn't in the right mindset for a while because I was still getting emails, and well, first it was text, and then we went on just a parenting app only. And for anyone who is in this situation with a parenting app, there's no email that can be sent and deleted, and it can become legal evidence if necessary. And if an email has threats or what have you, I believe nowadays the email won't be allowed to be sent. So my parenting skills, although I have cards with him proving that, oh, you're such a great mother, the conversation had switched. The writing had switched. I'm going to take the kids away from you. You have Munchausen syndrome, like all these things. You've abandoned your children. So my older son was told so many stories about me when I left and how I abandoned him, which, I'm the type of parent that I'll text you all day or call you. And if you don't answer me back, I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm
Mhm.
just one of those, just to tell you I love, sometimes I'll send a silly picture, a picture of the dog, and just, just want to know. And I do this with everybody really.
Mhm.
And, and so there was never that abandonment because I would still go to the house, make sure he was good, make him dinner, um, but again, the acts, whatever he was doing to me, he switched and started doing with my kids. My daughter had to start being his partner and support him like I would, whether it be in his business or mentally or he would ask for dating advice. I mean, it was very odd, the relationship. And she has seen in the last 4 years, um, his progression, escalation of what we know as a narcissist. Like she says, he's not even human. And his substance abuse is, now he has nobody watching him. So it's by far out of control. Um, I could just see it on his face and hear it in his voice. And when she was told some of these stories about me and how I was doing this all day long, or I was cheating on him, and she would say to him, "Well, how can she be doing this when she's at my school every day?" Because all throughout this, I'm PTA president. I'm on the board of a religious, organization. I'm on the board of the school. I'm room parent. I'm I'm volunteering. I'm fundraising chair for 5 years. I mean, like I'm working with special needs kids, and now I'm working with LGBTQ community. Like this is my life. That's my real
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
And then I had to do this. So she would look at him at 16 years old and say, "Well, how could you be doing this if she's at my school? Like if I see her,
Yeah.
she can't be there."
She started
Oh,
doubting you and
well,
figuring
she
it out.
didn't.
Yeah.
Well, she started questioning him, and he's not used to being questioned. And that's when he would get like a little bit off, and especially when his 16-year-old's questioning him. My son, unfortunately, um, thinks a little bit differently, and he wants his father to be his hero, you know,
Hmm.
and when his father shows that he's got a Purple Heart medal and tells that to his son that this is mine, even though it's his grandfather's, my son believes him. And remember what I told you, someone who's good at sales
Oh
can sell
yeah.
anyone anything,
Right.
right? So now
Right.
my older one, my son, is believing everything he's saying, even till today. And I am the same person that I was when I first had these kids. I'm a lot stronger now, obviously. But raising them was a full-time job. And I'm still that same person that is rooted in the ground, that people can count on, that if they need me for anything, I'm there. When he's sick, I'll send him food or soup, or I'll make it for him. When I say, "Why doesn't your father do it? He's down the street from you." Well, Dad's sleeping today, like all day.
Right.
And, normally that would say something to someone, but he
Right.
chooses also not to want to believe it. And I can understand that. So I kind of walk on a slippery slope out of respect for my child.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And my younger one, she's really sharp, and she's very much a feminist. And she really did figure everything out. She's a sharp cat. She actually, even when she met some of these friends, she would say, "Mom, I don't think that you should be friends with them." She was a kid. I mean, she was a young teenager, and she would say that to me because she reads. I don't know. Again, it's the generation,
Yeah.
you know. I didn't. I was like, "Oh, what does she know? She's 13." Spot on. She was spot on because they're all still friends with him now, but I'm out of the scene.
And so now that it's been 4 years,
Hmm.
well, approximately how long did it take I can only imagine that, I mean, your central nervous system,
Hmm.
your flight and fight survival
Hmm.
mode was
Shot.
overly, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
exactly, shot.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
how long did it take for that to start to kind of
Mhm.
balance out a little bit before you started getting a little more clarity and getting your energy back and getting the stronger spirit that you are now embellishing?
So that is a continual work in progress. It really is for all of us. For
Very
me,
true.
it took a long time, and it still does. And there's good moments and bad moments, and I don't even want to say good days and bad days. There's a moment. It could be, I'd be working on a patient, let's say, and I can't move away from what I'm doing, and I would have a panic attack because I'd have a flashback or a memory or
Mhm.
something. Or I would say something in my head, and like boom, I'd start to spiral. And we know it in DBT is like a chain of events happened. And so, I realized that I have to fill up like my Dora backpack. I have to fill it up with tools. And I believe in the Eastern and Western medicine. I definitely believe in medication to change your serotonin.
Right.
And again, being someone who's trained in that, I understand the chemistry of it, and I've studied the brain. Um, I also believe in the Eastern medicine of supplements and nutrition, meditation, um, affirmations, certain types of music, using all of your senses to change your mood. Um,
This is
and
excellent.
where you're at. Um, I believe to be rooted in the ground like an oak tree, which I always depended on someone else to be, but realizing that I am, in fact, the one who's strongly rooted in the ground. And no matter what comes at me, I will always be for myself and my kids. And I really have been for a lot of people, but those are the first, those three. And in order to do that, I need for my branches to be strong. And that's where
It's
all the
true.
stuff comes. And that's where all the stuff comes. So I'm constantly listening to things like your podcast or, you know, um, watching YouTube videos of somebody else speaking, listening to books. Because for those of us that have also been, gaslit or, have our own self doubt, we say certain things to ourselves or have flashbacks and visuals. So what do I like to do is I like to put in my AirPods or whatever it is and listen to somebody else's words that are positive. And it could be a YouTube affirmation. I go to bed every night to
Mhm.
something. Um, and so it changes the structure. It gets me
It
out of
does.
the past.
It
It
does.
completely does. It gets me out of the
Hmm.
past and into the present and sometimes into the future, especially because it's
True.
hard. And, unless you have a clear vision, and who knows what that means, of what it is that your future is going to look like. And, we never know. It helps with being in the present time. And so it really helps for me. And I'm a visual auditory learner. So it helps to see it sometimes, but I realized that the auditory is stronger. I'm needing an auditorial correction more so because otherwise I'll go into my own head, so to speak. And then I'll personally I'll regress, or if I'm in a situation of conflict, that fight might be there, and that's not appropriate necessarily. So I've learned to also say I can't talk right now, or I need a
Good.
moment, or what have you. And I'm still working on that, because of course, went from one extreme to the other. And anyone who's experienced sexual trauma, especially, no matter what age, or any sort of physical harm, we're so ready to protect ourselves.
Right.
And because, especially for those of us that had to protect our own self and get out, like there was nobody there for me, um, in a realistic way. And so I did have to toughen up a little bit again.
Hmm.
And so I have to really monitor that also and realize this person's not trying to hurt me. So the level of that
Right.
fight response doesn't need to be the same as it would in that other situation. So, staying aware is the
Yeah, I was
best.
gonna say
Is
that
the
actually.
It
It sounds
really
like
is.
you're keeping yourself aware. You're doing a
Yes.
lot
And
to keep yourself present and bring
I
yourself
am.
back and bring yourself back.
I am. I am. And exactly. And so, and there are certain things that I have, uh, after seeing, it's funny because I grew up in a situation, in a house where we prayed, and I always went to that, and I believe in mantras. And then, of course, after seeing the Tina Turner theater show and her movie, I watched again, even this last year. She does an excellent job of showing us what a mantra is like in Buddhism, and it could be anything. It could be something where you say, I am healthy and safe, and you say it over and over again, and you create some sort of a ritual, which I love rituals. And she actually has some really great, on Apple Music and on YouTube. Her Tina Turner singing her mantra, the Buddhist mantra. It's beautiful, and that kind of helps with our somatic system, the nervous system,
Yes.
because any sort of talking. I mean, you can even feel it if you talk a little bit lower. You could feel it, from your esophagus all the way down your trachea, all the way down into your whole body. And so that kind of helps with that. Um, so that it's anyone, again, like I said, with trauma, you jump almost like when a dog hears something or they think they hear something, they sit up.
Right. It's instinct.
Yeah, it's instinct, and I live that. Speaking of my dog, that's my dog. That's me. That's how I lived for a long time, and I've had to really find tools to change that. and
I can hear
and
you. You've got
that's
some incredible tools that you gained.
yeah, yeah. And I do speak a little bit about that on the website, and if you want to contact me, I can definitely message
And
back
your
immediately.
website is called fromthefloortothedoor.com,
Yes.
and this is where people can get a hold of you and contact you.
Yes. Yeah. And even in the middle of the night, because I know what it's like to wake up at 2 in the morning and have a panic attack. I know,
Imagine.
and then have to go to work the next day. Like, I know, and I know how to monitor that, whether it be breathing. And I mean, everyone hates the whole like breath exercise.
Yeah, but
I
actually,
think
the
that,
breathing exercises is
hmm
what
hmm
stabilizes your
correct.
cortisol levels
Yep.
and
Yep.
grounds you and brings you back.
It
Michelle, well, I have
does.
one last question here before we
Sure.
go. What is the number one piece of advice you can give a woman that is being abused?
We all hear it. It's trust your instincts.
Trust your
Trust your instincts.
instincts. Yes.
Trust your instincts. We, especially as women, are created to have more so, because whether we choose to or not, whether able to or not, we are created to have children, or ancestors were created. Remember what I talked about with all how many people it took to create you. You split that in half, that's the feminine.
Hmm.
And there's an energy there. And, if it doesn't feel right, it's not right. Something's off, something's off. It feels off, it's off. And it could
Yeah.
be the slightest thing, and there's many instances of that. So I'm going to throw with that, I'm going to throw in prepare yourself slowly, prepare yourself in every aspect, physically, emotionally, financially, whether it be gift cards that you buy and or money somebody holds for you, you put it in, underneath your car, the seat of your car, slowly. I'm the type of person that always wants to be prepared. Having children made that worse. I always had enough for my own kids and everybody else's kids in the diaper bag. So I would have 4 pairs of shoes for everything just in case, and sweaters like my grandmother did in my car. So when I left, I had clothes in my car, um, which was kind of funny, actually. We've talked about that. But um, start doing some of that and play it off as, well, it's cold in the office, or, I never know, or I might be going for a walk after work, in the neighborhood. In this way, I can just put on my sneakers. Just always be prepared in some form or another.
Always be
And
prepared and trust your instincts.
things, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you, Michelle.
Mhm,
Thank you so much for being brave and telling your story
mhm,
and just for being you and
mhm.
because you're shining bright now. You may not
Appreciate
feel like that 100% all the time, and nobody does, but the
it. Yeah.
way that you're handling things right now with the tools that you've gained, the knowledge that you're acquiring, and the way that you're sharing your story and your website and helping empower other women, this is incredible, Michelle. And I
Thank
really
you.
hope that you can definitely see the beauty in that. And I know you do, because I can feel
Mhm.
that you see the beauty and this enlightenment that you're gaining from all this. As you said in the beginning, you're basically turning all the trauma you went through to now helping other people come out on
Yes.
the other side. And that's really a beautiful thing, Michelle.
Yeah,
Thanks so
that's the goal.
much. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being brave here on A Little Less Fear podcast, Michelle. And we're definitely keeping in touch.
Yes, I love that. Thank
Take care
you.
now.
You too.